As you can see from the title, we're going to talk about the Praetorian Guards. You probably even know that was the name. I got that name from the Blu-ray. I think most people just think of these guys as like the throne room guards, the throne room guys, those badass throne room guards, fighter guys. That's what we think of them. That's the only time we saw these guys in the throne room. But that's what we're talking about today. We're gonna talk about these guys. What was their job? You know, how good were they? We're gonna give them like maybe a little job performance rating, right? So basically, let's just get right into it. Okay, I'm not going to intro and talk about anything else. You know who these guys are. Let's get right into it. As the title says, the Praetorian Guards literally had one job to do. Only one job. They was dispatched to have like just one job. And boy did they F that thing up. Let's go talk about it. So to put things in proper perspective, I was going to just sit down and talk about it, and then I said, you know what, my viewers, expect me to do, my due diligence on things, like not just rant about stuff. There's a certain quality level I think you guys come to expect when I give a presentation. So yeah, I said, you know what, I'm gonna like get more information on these guys, because we don't know much about these guys, right? And we don't know their backstory, anything like that. We just know what we saw, and frankly, our interaction from the film was kind of limited, to be perfectly honest. So, just bought my due diligence. I said, let me look these guys up, see if there's anything written about these guys. And all right, so I came up with some information. I mean, this comes from Wikipedia, so it's readily available. I think you can consider it pretty. I don't know if accurate is the right word. Well, let me put it this way. I think that in general, you can probably take this on face value for the most part, right? Typically comes from like an assembly of fact-based promotional material. So let's just get into it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, because the whole little article talks about the backstory, and some of these guys even have names. We never heard no names in the movie. Talks a little about the weapons and stuff like that, and the armor. We're not going to get into that. I'm just going to talk about information relevant to what we saw, directly relevant to their job. All right. The elite Praetorian Guard was a first order unit that consisted of 8 human warriors divided into 4 pairs. Like the Imperial Royal Guards who protected Emperor Palpatine during the reign of the Galactic Empire, the Praetorian Guards served as elite personnel bodyguards of Supreme Leader Snoke, ruler of the military junta and Hermetic state known as the First Order. As such, they were trained to protect the Supreme Leader by meeting any threat with a ferocious response. Clad in red armor and robes, the Praetorian Guards' appearance deliberately echoed that of the Emperor's Royal Guardsmen. As combatants, they specialized in several forms of martial arts, such as teras kasi, and carried various high-tech melee weapons. So let's go, that's just sort of the general synopsis. Let's go into a little more detail. As the First Order mirrored many of the dark traditions of the Galactic Empire, the elite Praetorian Guard originated from the Emperor's Royal Guard, personal bodyguards of Galactic Emperor Sheev Palpatine. The Praetorian Guard was an elite force of 8 human warriors who protected the First Order's leader, Supreme Leader Snoke. They flanked the Supreme Leader in his throne room and held in Snoke's mega-class Star Dreadnought the Supremacy. Aside from their obvious origin from the Emperor's Royal Guard, they also were derived to some extent from the Atresian Emperor's Royal Guards, in particular how each of them operated in pairs. 3 of the guards were known as the 1st, 3rd, and 7th Guards, respectively. Snoke had to rely on them for dealing with physical threats from a lethal distance, as while he still retained his potent force abilities, he was well past his prime regarding his physical prowess, and thus could not deal with any direct threats to him. So now let's get into what they say with respect to specific scenes in the movie. And this is really the critical parts here. The guards were holding court as usual in Snoke's throne room when the Supreme Leader summoned his apprentice Kylo Ren, whom he proceeded to berate for his losses on Star Killer Base. When Kylo responded aggressively to the taunting, the guards quickly assumed combat-ready stances but stood down at Snoke's gesture. That's the scene that we saw. Fast forward to a different scene here now. While Snoke was telling Rey how she and the Resistance were doomed, Rey grabbed Kylo Ren's lightsaber to attack him. The guards immediately attempted to attack her, but Snoke called them down. As she tried to attack Snoke, he used the Force to push her away while the guards returned to their neutral stances. Okay, later in this scene. When Snoke was assassinated by Ren, the Praetorian Guards immediately sprung into action to avenge the death of their leader. Ren and Rey, who were present for the assassination, engaged all 8 of the guards in a short yet intense fight. The guards were at first evenly matched against the 2 Force wielders, with their weapons being resistant to their foes' lightsabers, and managed to score a wound apiece on them. However, they were ultimately no match for the 2 and fell one by one, with the last guard being killed when Kylo ignited Rey's lightsaber, which she had thrown to him through his faceplate, killing him instantly. Ren then assumed the title of Supreme Leader. Alright, so that's I'm going to call it the official version of these guys, or semi-official version of these guys. Okay, so let me first say that this synopsis, this description of I'll say their actions, their responsiveness, what have you, is almost like something put out by like their publicist. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of little nuances to what was written here. A lot of little nuances that quite correct. Now, listen, mind you now, you've probably seen, I don't know how many times you've seen the film. I'm guessing if you're someone watching this video, you've probably seen it at least twice, possibly more, right? But that said, you don't really remember specifically what the guards did at every little occasion, right? So, for example, I read through this and I said to myself, now wait a minute now. When Kylo was confronting Snoke or vice versa with the helmet and stuff like that, I don't remember the guards doing a darn thing, at all. I don't remember them jumping into battle stance or nothing like that. Like all this stuff about the guards ready to attack and him waving them off. I don't really remember any of that. You know what I'm saying? I had to go back. I had to go back and watch these scenes to get to the bottom of it, because some of it just didn't jibe exactly with what I remembered. But I could be wrong. No one was paying attention to exactly what the guards were doing at every beat of the scene, right? And that said, these descriptions made them sound a lot more, aggressive than I recall. I'm not talking about when they was fighting in the end. Before that, it made them seem a lot more aggressive than what I recall. And like I said, a lot of this sounds almost like they're, apologists, right? Because you can imagine, afterwards, when they realized Snoke was dead and everything, I mean, you can imagine that people was coming at them, like, kind of saying, "No, what the hell?" You had like 8 guys. They literally had one job, and they effed it up. Like, how is that even possible? What the hell was they doing? Why weren't they on the job? Why were they not paying attention? They were derelicting their duties. You have 8 guys. How can 8 guys, let that happen? They were asleep at the wheel. This is uncalled for. That's irresponsible. All they do is like all they're worried about is posing and flexing and going to the gym, while they should be concentrating on protection skills and being a good bodyguard and all that. People probably coming at them right and left, harassing the families and stuff like that. And so, somewhere someone's probably coming forward and said, "No, it's not like that. No, hold on now." When Murray was, threatening, they jumped into action and they pounced on her, and they were ferocious fighters. They were very aggressive. Blah blah blah. So, you heard this account of what they're about, right? So, let's do a little fact checking on some of these statements put out here. I'm not trying to necessarily, come out the right of this, because frankly, this is more of a discussion of what these guys actually did than what someone said they did. I mean, you can watch the movie just as much as I can watch the movie, and you can see for yourself. So, but I think just from a well, let me put it this way, I'm coming at this like they was kind of derelict at the duty. I'll just put that out there. They had just one job. They effed it up, and I question a lot of stuff that they did. If you were to read this spin on it, it made it sound like, oh no, they was on top of their game. They was very responsive. It's totally attentive, and Snoke had to like shut them down because they was ready to take action and blah blah blah. Okay, well let's just vet this out a little bit. let's just vet this out a little bit and see where the discrepancy lies. If there's a discrepancy between what I remember and what they're kind of describing, right? So let's go to this first scene. So, according to this account, and I'll reread it. It's just one sentence, basically. It says, when Kylo responded aggressively to the taunting, the guards quickly assumed combat-ready stances, but stood down at Snoke's gesture. Now, there's a couple little things going on here. Now, first of all, this sentence leaves out a critical little plot event. And if you recall this scene, what they're leaving out here is not an inconsequential event, but kind of non-inconsequential. When Kylo stood up, Snoke repelled him with like a mini light bolt and threw him back, right? I mean, this kind of leaves that out. That's something that, that's something that you would think that they would put in that little exchange there, because that was a really important point, right? So let's break this down. And it's a lot of little nuance going on here. So I went back and watched the scene, and so let me give it to you blow by blow, all right? Because of course, you're not thinking, you can't break it down second by second, frame by frame in your mind going back. That was almost a year ago, right? Okay, so let me refresh your memory. They're having a little tension moment, right? Kylo comes in with his helmet. Snoke is berating him. What good are you? You had a fight with Rey. She held her own. So Kylo is almost on his knees, so to speak. He sort of has knelt down as a sign of respect. He's already taken off his helmet, because Snoke said, take off your helmet. Be for real. I ain't having that. Take off your helmet. Let me look at you. Kylo has a scar on his face. So this is what Snoke says. You were unbalanced, bested by a girl who had never held a lightsaber. You failed. That's when Kylo was really kind of incensed. That's when he was from like a kneeling position. He really kind of jumped up from that position, and in jumping up, like his cape, he had a cape on, but I guess it was not attached to nothing. So when he jumped up, the cape kind of flew out. He was holding his helmet in his right hand, so his arms were sort of outstretched to the side. So no, he wasn't about to throw a punch or nothing. Okay, his arms were literally just out at the sides. He wasn't reaching for his lightsaber. He wasn't approaching Snoke. He just rose up, but very, very aggressively. That's true. He rose up aggressively in anger. Okay. And the cape flew off. It was very dramatic. But the second he stood upright, almost simultaneously as him standing upright, Snoke hit him with a little lightning bolt then at his feet, and that threw him backwards onto his butt. That happened simultaneously to him standing up, and in a beat later, that's when the guards assumed the combat position. All right, so it wasn't per se that Kylo stood up and then they responded. It wasn't quite that boom boom. The the fact of the matter is, Kylo stood up, kind of startled everybody. He seemed like he was about to do something. Got hit with that lightning, and then immediately thereafter, the guards went into their combat stance. So to say simply that when Kylo responded aggressively with the taunting, the guards quickly assumed combat-ready stances, you're leaving out some important little points there, right? And then Kylo's on his boat. Snoke turns around and walks back to his chair, right? Because Snoke was standing up at the time. He was in front of his chair. He turns around, walks back to his chair, and the guards assume the neutral position on their own. Why is that important? Because this says that the guards quickly assumed combat-ready stances, but stood down at Snoke's gesture. Snoke made no gesture. He didn't wave him down. He didn't say no. He didn't put up his hands. He just simply walked back to his seat and sat down. No gesture. Now, you want to say, oh no, but the fact that he was calm and just sat down, that was a gesture of that everything is under control, and they read that as a gesture. Look, that's not how I take a gesture. To me, if someone says they stood down in response to a gesture, to me, that means they actually, waved them off. They actually did something, not something subtle and indirect like that. So I watched this little nuance several times, specifically looking for a gesture. No gesture. He simply turned around, sat down on his throne room, slumped down into his, cocky as hell, slumped down into his seat, and those guys just, went back to the stance on their own. So that's just a little fact checking on that, right? The point being, no, these guys, this would make it sound like on their own they just jumped into action because they thought that there was a threat, and they repelled the threat by jumping, taking combat stance, and Kylo immediately said, he held off because he saw that he was surrounded by these guards in combat. No, that's not really the picture there. He stood up, he got hit with the little lightning bolt. There was like a moment of tension, and then these guys went into combat stance. Then they went back, not by any direction from anybody, but on their own. All right? Okay, so now let's go to Rey's confrontation. And there's a lot going on there. It's hard to really remember all the little things that happen there, because there are a lot of little moving parts to that scene. And if you just try to remember it on your own, it's very easy to get mixed up, because Rey's lightsaber was in play, Kylo Ren's lightsaber was in play, they was moving around, there's a lot of things going on. So let me try to refresh your memory. But let's go back to what they say here. While Snoke was telling Rey how she and the Resistance were doomed, Rey grabbed Kylo Ren's lightsaber to attack him. The guards immediately attempted to attack her, but Snoke called them down. Alright, so let's look at all the little pieces to this scene. The scene starts with her in these electronic handcuffs. The handcuffs come off. Snoke starts going into his little lecture there. Kylo Ren is holding Rey's lightsaber in his left hand. Snoke, with the Force, pulls that lightsaber out of Kylo Ren's hand, sets it down by his right side on the armrest of the chair. Then he pulls Rey forward. At that's when her feet are just barely off the ground. Then he's talking to her about he's gonna, break her, find out, where Luke is. He puts his right hand over kind of the side of her face, right? And he said, "You will give me everything." And that's when he propels her back with the force backward into the air. Okay, she's levitated into the air. Then they break scene. They come back later and resume that scene. He releases her from the air. She falls to the floor. So then she stands up from that. And that's when Rey reaches out to summon her own lightsaber, which is on Snoke's armrest, puts out a hand to grab it. The lightsaber starts flying through the air toward her hand, but Snoke intervenes and diverts the path of the lightsaber so that it wraps around behind her like a boomerang and comes back, hits her in the head, and then her lightsaber again returns to Snoke's armrest. So that's when Snoke pulls her then to that little side viewer screen or device, whatever you want to call that, where you can see what's going on other parts of the galaxy, what have you, or the front line. That's when he levitates her over to that side viewer thing and tells her how how the transporters are being destroyed one by one. Now, from that position, Rey, with the Force, pulls Kylo's lightsaber, grabs it, ignites it, and at that point the guards assume their battle position. That's when Snoke puts up his hand, gestures to them to stand down. Rey then runs at Snoke with her lit lightsaber, with the lit lightsaber, and in turn Snoke repels her back with the Force to the floor on her back. She loses grip of that lightsaber, which again is Kylo Ren's. Kylo Ren then actually picks up the lightsaber, holds it. That's when Snoke pretty much lifts Rey off the floor, has her sort of in a kneeling position, rotates her around, then starts telling Kylo, strike her down. Basically, I'm paraphrasing them, but basically little speeches. Oh, strike her down, I can read your mind. And that's when Kylo Ren impales Snoke with the lightsaber, pulls it forward, which in essence cuts him in half. Rey grabs it as it's flying through the air, which again is her lightsaber. So both he and she have their own lightsabers. She stands up, they look at each other. Moments later, and that's important, that's when they engage the Praetorian Guards for that extended battle. Now, that's what happened for me analyzing the scene, right? So let's go back to how they explained it here. Rey grabbed Kylo Ren's lightsaber to attack him. The guards immediately attempted to attack her, but Snoke called them down. Now, that's not exactly what happened. If you were to read that, you would say, the guards immediately attempted to attack her. That would lead you to believe that they, ran from their positions and, ran up on her and, made steps toward her, approached her. They were startled. They said, oh, hell no. Ran and got in front of Snoke. They attempted to attack her. Connotes to me something different. That they, attempted to attack her. They approached her. They came up on her or started coming up on her. No, that's not what happened. All they did was assume their battle stance. They didn't go anywhere. They just assumed that stance And yes, that is when Snoke told them to, with a hand gesture, essentially, stand down. Now, mind you, right after that is when Rey runs at Snoke with the lit lightsaber. Meanwhile, the guards are still at their little standing stations in neutral, not making a move, standing there like effing statues, not doing a goddamn thing, while this lady is coming at Snoke with a lit lightsaber. How is that being a bodyguard? Where, how is that catching a bullet for their boss? They literally froze. They literally just stood there and did nothing when this lady's, who has some force also, is coming at the person they're supposed to protect. She's coming at them, coming at Snoke with a lit lightsaber, and they don't do a goddamn thing. Now, how's that being a good bodyguard? It was only Snoke who repelled her and shot her back, but they was just standing there doing not a goddamn thing. All right, that's not being a good bodyguard, as far as I'm concerned. So this idea that the guards immediately attempted to attack her, but Snoke called them down. As she tried to attack Snoke, he used the Force to push her away, while the guards returned to the neutral stances. So that's as I said, he repelled them. They were not involved. Not only that, but as he pushed her away with the Force, they went back to their neutral stances. They didn't move. Now you can say, oh yeah, well they were in combat-ready stances. Yeah, but what good is being in combat-ready stance from the other side of the room while someone is coming at your boss with a lit lightsaber? Like, what good is that? These guys stood, in four quarters all over the room while there's like a threat, like multiple threats against Snoke, and all these guys were doing is posing and going in combat racing. What good is a combat stance if you're on the other side of the room? That's not helping nobody. All right? Okay, so let's move forward. This then says, when Snoke was assassinated by Ren, the Praetorian Guards immediately sprung into action to avenge the death of their leader. Now, we all saw the scene. Kylo Ren ignited this lightsaber. It impaled Snoke. These guys are not even in the frame. These guys did absolutely nothing. Were these guys running at Snoke, saying, oh my God, Snoke, pulling the thing out, or rendering some kind of immediate attention to the guy? Those guys literally froze. They were nowhere. They weren't even in the picture. This idea that they, quote unquote, immediately sprung into action. No, they did not immediately spring into action. They froze. They didn't do a goddamn thing. They just stood there, wherever the hell they were. To our knowledge, they didn't even get into not even to any kind of combat-ready stance. They just stood by while their boss got impaled with the lightsaber, did absolutely nothing, followed by, there was a pause there. It wasn't even immediate. That's when Kylo Ren pulled the lightsaber through the guy's body and cut him in half. Even with that, these guys are not doing anything. These guys are nowhere to be found. Not in the scene. So immediately sprung into action. What? How do you even consider that immediately doing nothing? Then Rey grabs her lightsaber. They stand there, stare at each other, kind of talking with their facial expressions. And that's when these guys jump in. That's when these guys all of a sudden figure, oh shit. This is when the guys now say, now we got to do something, right? This is when they figure they're going to, according to this, avenge their boss's death. Now let's talk about this for a second. So Kylo Ren kills Snoke. these guys, they literally going back to the title, these guys had one job, that was protect this guy, and they effed that up big time. They just stood by while the guy got impaled, didn't do nothing immediately. If that wasn't bad enough, they let the guy get cut in two, fall on the floor, tongue hanging out, bleeding all over his dinner jacket, and they're nowhere. They're not even in the scene. No one's coming to this guy. They just immediately start attacking Ren and Ray, right? You know, you could even question why they're even doing that, right? I mean, let's look at what probably was their job description. Let's look at the job description. Job description number 1. Don't let this guy get killed. That's number 1. Now apparently, to them, part 2 is if you fail at part 1, avenge the death of the guy. Right? Do you think that was in the job description? I mean, why is it that they're fighting these Ren and Ray at this point? To be quite honest, now you could argue they should have just taken them into custody or arrested them, put them under house arrest, whatnot. I mean that might have been a reasonable response, right? Or you're gonna say, oh no way they could do that because they're still beholden to Kylo Ren. That would be almost insubordination. Well, no, I mean you would think that they would have the authority to arrest someone who's staging a coup, which is basically what Kylo Ren was doing. They could take it upon themselves to to arrest the insubordinate, right? The coup leader, as the Praetorian Guards. They probably would have authority to do that. Okay, they didn't do that. So they figure they're going to, avenge the death of their leader. Now you can say, okay, so they make a calculation that there's 8 of them. They're bigger and bulkier. There's 8 of them against a kind of, less bulky guy and a lady. Now, albeit they have the force. Now, I can't, you can't understate that. That's actually, a big game changer. That does level the playing field a lot. But that said, they're making a calculation. Now, there's 8 of us. We have more sophisticated weapons than they do. We have more advanced hand-to-hand fighting skill training probably than either of them. And we feel that that's probably a fair fight. And at worst, look, we were defending the honor of our boss, and we have to put our life on the line, considering that we if this whole thing up, and we're going to get blamed for it anyway. So we might as well die fighting, trying to avenge the guy's death rather than face all the humiliation that we're going to get going back to wherever the hell we're from. Who knows, right? Though, that said, you could make the argument that, look, once they kill Snoke, one of them guys could have easily said, So, so does this mean we work for you now? Right? Maybe they just like totally sidestep the whole fighting issue and, pledge allegiance to this guy, right? We've seen that before. That's not a weird movie moment, right? When they killed the Wicked Witch of the West and Wizard of Oz, them guys didn't try to avenge her death, right? They knelt down before Dorothy, or something to that effect, basically, right? So that's not unheard of, right? No, but they took it upon themselves to say, no, we're going to take revenge and settle the score with these guys. And they died. So much for that idea. So, I mean, so the bottom line here is that even though this description, and I'm nitpicking with the description, well, it's really meant to highlight my assertion that these guys weren't on the job, like they was kind of derelict in their duties. They showed multiple instances where there was an immediate threat to the guy, to Snoke, and they was just posing like from across the room. They could not have done nothing. If Rey took a swipe at this guy with a lightsaber, what the hell were they going to do from across the room in a combat-ready stance? Nothing they did. It's not like they had some type of weapon that could have a projectile. They was across the room. It would take them a second and a half, 1 to 2 seconds to get over there. There's nothing to protect this guy from having her cut his head off, right? And as it turns out, Snoke gets impaled because they're on the other side of the room. They're nowhere to be found. They're not close. They could not have done anything from across the room, even with all these sophisticated weapons, right? So no, I don't feel they was good at their job, right? It makes a pretty picture with them all spread out, all that kind of stuff. But just as a bodyguard formation, is certainly not very effective. And when their boss is under threat, being all spread out like that in combat ready stance really doesn't add very much, does it? When Kylo Ren jumped up like he was about to start something, what good would it be for them to be all on the side of the room in a combat ready stance? Somebody needed to jump in there and tackle this guy. But these guys did none of that. The only time this in that room, in the throne room scene, Snoke literally came under attack several times. Look, Rey tried to get her own lightsaber to come at this guy. Rey, to her credit, she was coming after this guy multiple times in that scene. She tried to grab her own lightsaber to come at this guy. She grabbed Kylo Ren's lightsaber to come at this guy. And, the guy basically was protecting himself. He wasn't even relying on these guys. I don't even know. Why were these guys even there? What good are these guys? They're so far away. They're not of any kind of help. They're not of any kind of practical help or assistance being so far away with handheld weapons. What good are they to this guy's immediate safety being so far away? They can't catch a bullet for the guy. They can't take a blow for the guy. They can't jump in between Snoke and the threat. They're there almost purely for intimidation. And as it turned out, Snoke was able to repel these different threats on his own, just with the Force. He never even fought anybody. he just used the force in every one of these instances, which raises the point of why does he even need guards? Why does he even need guards? Because they were, at the end of the day, they were perfectly useless. They never intervened. They never protected the guy. At the end of the day, they were perfectly useless. They tried to jump into the game after the horse had left the stable. After the train had left the station, that's when they turned into ferocious warriors, right? But other than that, they was completely useless at their job. They only had one job, and that was protect this guy, and they wasn't even doing a responsible, diligent job at it. The guy was basically protecting himself, right? Now you're gonna say, no, but see, that you're just talking. You're basing this on one situation with Snoke and two people, But this guy was in a whole bunch of situations. He could be at like he could have like a state dinner, and with like 8 to 10 people, and all of a sudden those 10 people could turn out to be assassins, and they could all be coming at Snoke. And thank God they had these 8 guys there to protect him. That would be a situation where you needed these guys, and so they have a very vital function. It may not have seemed evident in this particular situation, because this was a very unique situation. But in general, this guy has a life outside of just this one little scene here. This guy's all over the galaxy doing different things, different kind of threats, and these Praetorian Guards come in very handy. Now, what I would say to that is, let's take this idea that he's at some type of function, and 8 to 10 guys, diplomats. It seemed like diplomats turned out to be assassins, and they all came at Snoke, right, at the state dinner or whatever the hell event it was, function, whatever event, right? Now, between you and me, is there any doubt in your mind that Snoke could dispatch the 8 to 10 assassins by himself? Do you really think that 8 to 10 assassins, I don't even care what kind of weapons they had, do you really think that they could take down Snoke, these 8 to 10 people who don't have the force? Don't you think Snoke could handle himself? Don't you think that Snoke could really handle himself against any threat, just about any number of people? Put up some type of protective barrier, shield, or repel people. Repel anybody and everybody coming at the guy. What are these guys really for, except to pose and to flex and look intimidating and all this kind of stuff, right? So, that's my thoughts on that guy. These guys were useless, a waste of time. They should have their clearances revoked, whatever. These guys were totally, derelict. Now you're gonna say, well, don't blame them. They just follow instructions. However their rules of engagement. Snoke sets their rules for engagement. So don't, he's the boss. If they've set that all up in advance. You are putting too much on the guards to have been making these decisions on when to run up on these threats and people. That's not fair, because Snoke tells them how to engage, and if he says stand down, and they know that they're just supposed to assume a combat ready position in this situation, that situation, don't blame them. That's all set up in advance. They're just following orders. You're not being fair. All right, that's a valid point. That the guards probably don't set the rules of engagement themselves. All right, but having said that, they are still the eyes and ears of this guy, right? There's 8 of these guys, right? And it's still within their job description to be vigilant, right? And they have 8 guys looking at the situation. One of them guys should have seen this lightsaber rotating. That doesn't look ordinary. It wasn't hidden from view. It was in plain sight. You had at least 4 guys on that side in close proximity that could see what was going on. One of them could have said, Master, I don't even know what they call the guy, Sir Snoke, Master Snoke, the lightsaber's rotating. One of these guys could have seen that thing rotating and figured something's not right and jumped over there and swatted that thing away from the armrest, right? That's their job, to be vigilant and anticipate threats and stuff, and they didn't do that. So no, I don't give you that. I still hold them responsible. I still feel that they were derelict, that they could have prevented that they fell down on the job, and they were otherwise useless. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. So that's it for today, guys. We're winning deep on these guys. They're supposed to be the most elite guys, the most responsible guys, ferocious fighters, etc., etc., the best in their class, the highest 8 guys in elite Praetorian Academy, whatever, and these guys just totally fell down on the job. That's how I see it. What do you think? You think these guys were responsible? You think they were good guards, or you feel they was a joke? Give me your opinions down below, guys. Thanks for watching today. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Please, if you're not subscribing already, subscribe. I got more content coming. We're having a lot of fun here. I'm having a lot of fun here. Look forward to giving you more content, more videos down the road. I will see you next time.